But, Sean, let's go into the last team, and we're saving the best for last. The runners-up from last year in the national championship. They were teased close from being the national championships, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs. First question I want to ask you about them is probably exceeded expectations last year. Does this team take a step back this year? Are they a team that not necessarily doesn't get back to the national championship game, because making it back-to-back national championship games would be impressive, but could this be a Georgia Bulldog team that doesn't make the playoffs in 2018?
Yeah, I think this could be a team that doesn't make the playoffs again. I mean, they over-succeeded expectations, like you mentioned, having a freshman quarterback like Jake Fromm, and then also you're losing Roquan Smith, you're losing Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, you're losing some important players on this team that made it to the national championship. Could I see them not making the national championship and not making the playoffs? For sure. It's tough to be top 4 team back-to-back years in college football. But will this be a team that is in the race, in the running, in the top 10? For sure. This is a team that with a ton of talent, with a great head coach, that has a fairly easy schedule, that outside of a couple games, they should be favored by 10 points. So this is a team that I think with Jake Fromm, who was a freshman, now has another year under his belt and performed fantastically, 21 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, over 2,000 yards. This could be a team that really makes some noise again for the second time in the NCAA.
And this is a team that I think, like, out of all the previews, this is going to be our easiest one for this side, because...
Well, it's really how good will they be?
You mentioned, like, they lose Roquan Smith, they lose Sony Michel, they lose Nick Chubb. But they'll have guys to fill up, especially on the defensive side. For me, out of those guys, the question is DeAndre Swift and freshman Zamir White, are they going to be able to fill the shoes of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel?
Those are some big shoes.
To me, though, the big question, I look at the schedule. Last year, they only had 1 loss before that national championship game, and I'll count it. They only had 2 losses all year. Those 2 losses to the Auburn Tigers and to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, Auburn, they got to get the revenge on Auburn in the SEC title game, beating them 28-7. To me, the only game I could see them losing yet again this year is Auburn. However, to me, that is the most crucial game of the year, because I am going to throw a hypothetical at your direction, Sean.
All right, do it.
Last week, I told Brandon that my prediction, just to be fun with the SEC, is going to be that, I'll put it this way, Alabama beats Auburn in the Iron Bowl. No, scratch that.
Okay.
Auburn beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl.
All right.
Auburn beats Georgia in the regular season. Georgia beats Auburn in the SEC title game. You have an Auburn team, you have an Alabama team, you have a Georgia team, all with 1 loss. The committee is set on fire. We're going home. We're not having a playoff this year. Because what do? You put all 3 of them in?
You just put Alabama in, because that's what they would do.
That's the kind of situation, though, that we could be in, where it's like Georgia,
that was kind of the situation we were in last
year.
year.
Georgia, Auburn, and, Auburn was the only one that had 2 losses. Those 3 teams could only have 1 loss again. Like, for Georgia, they need to beat Auburn in the regular season, and they need to win the SEC title for me to get to the playoff, because if a 1-loss Alabama team could make the playoff last year, I'm not going to bank that, we could be the same. I'm going to say we need to maybe get out of this, and I know coaches aren't going to think about this. I'm going to think about this. We need to get out of that. We need to go undefeated, so it's an for sure doubt that we're in the playoff.
If Georgia goes undefeated and it's a close loss to Auburn or Alabama in the SEC championship game, they're in. If one of these teams finishes with 1 loss, they're in, no matter what.
What if 3 of them did, though? Do 3 of them get in? That would be insane.
I don't think that happens.
We just have an SEC playoff.
An SEC playoff game. Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy hypothetical, but I think Georgia probably has the best shot of doing it because, yes, Auburn's on the schedule, but it's at home, so that's going to be the biggest thing. And then also you look at the other game that they could possibly lose, and I think that's South Carolina, just to start off the season if Georgia's caught napping. But outside of that, I think it's a very easy road for them to get back to that playoff. It's just really, I think it would come down to how bad did you beat them. So how bad did Georgia beat Auburn at home? Then how bad did Alabama beat Auburn? Or Auburn beat Alabama? And then how bad did Alabama beat Georgia? I think it would come down to that. And I think we probably see two teams again in from the SEC get to the playoff. It's just really the question of which one. And I think Georgia probably has the best odds, weirdly enough, because I think they beat Auburn at home, and then you just need to really go to that SEC title game and beat Alabama and get revenge. And they're going to be fired up to make sure they get that revenge of the national title game. Or you're going to go up against Auburn again, where you have that confidence to beat them. So it's going to be something that's interesting, but I think Georgia probably does have the best shot to get back to the playoffs outside of those three SEC teams.
And one thing that we did not mention in our South Carolina preview that I'm going to mention right now, you know what makes that game against the Gamecocks even a little bit more interesting for Georgia is, so that game's going to be on the road in South Carolina.
Yep.
Last year, I'll take you in the Wayback Machine. They play a little Appalachian State team, easy team, beat them 31-10. Then in their second game, they take a road trip to South Bend. That was a grueling game. They only beat them by 1 point.
Yeah, it sucked.
So, I mean, well, for you, because Notre Dame fan.
It sucked.
But, I mean, we saw that story last year.
It was also a monsoon.
It was also a monsoon, but, like, we saw that story last year. Kirby Smart, I know, coming out of week 1, is going to be reminding his guys, like, hey, we can't be napping. We were almost caught napping last year. But they weren't the same high-level team last year.
And it was also early on in the season. No one expected a ton from Georgia.
Some would say that team or that game might have turned it, because after that it was 42-14, 31-3, 41-0, 45-14.
And Fromm was just getting used to being quarterback. He wasn't bad in his first two games, but he was just getting, again,
but that was
used
probably
to playing.
the game that snapped it, and then they just blew out everyone except for their two losses to Auburn and Alabama. I'm not going to say the Oklahoma one was a blowout because it was in double overtime.
Yeah, and it wasn't a blowout. I mean, they only won by, 6 points?
54-48.
So, again, I think it's something where you look at this team and they're kind of settled in. I mean, it's something where, they have a very similar schedule from last year. They have Austin Peay at home, and then they go away to South Carolina. Again, a good team, and then they play a cupcake. So I think that Georgia, again, is set up, like I said, to be the team that goes and represents the SEC in the playoff, because there's going to be one team that gets there, and especially having that loss to Auburn in the regular season, and especially at Auburn, that's going to play into that game in October. And then if you go to the SEC championship game, you want another win over Alabama. You want to be able to knock them in the mouth, especially after that overtime loss. You have a freshman quarterback, 26-23, and they put their freshman quarterback in, and you're up at halftime.
Not just that guy thought about transferring before that game.
We were up at halftime. That was like your game to win. I think Kirby Smart's going to get his guys fired up. Now it's just really, can they be level-headed in every single game? Can they be level-headed against South Carolina? Can they be level-headed against Auburn? Can they make sure they stay on focus? And I think Kirby Smart will be able to do that. So I look at this Georgia team. I know we haven't really talked about too much about their players, but there's not too much to say, because you lost eight of the players on defense from last year, but also I trust their depth. They have they know how to scout.
Let me ask you this: you say we haven't talked about the players. I'll ask you about one. Jake Fromm. Is he going to have? We'll play this game. Better, same, or worse season this year?
Better.
How much better?
I think he throws more interceptions, but I think he throws for more yards. I think he probably throws for about 25 touchdowns. He threw 5 touchdowns last year, so maybe 10 interceptions and probably like 2,600 yards.
Yeah, he had 21 touchdowns last year.
I think he has a really good year. I think again, he was limited because he was a freshman quarterback. He was limited because he had fucking Sony Michel and Nick Chubb as his backs.
Won't have those this year.
I think he's going to see more of a usage increase, and I think he's really going to ball out, because he didn't show me anything where he said, all right, that's a bad quarterback. He showed me, all right, this kid's going to be a starting NFL quarterback in a couple of years. Even though he's 6'1", he's going to be an NFL quarterback when that time comes in the next 3 years or in the next 4 years. He's a guy that I really like. He's not a typical SEC quarterback. I think this kid's something special. And that's the reason why you got rid of Jacob Eason, because this guy is, again, and not get rid of Jacob Eason, but this is why Jacob Eason now had to transfer, because he wasn't getting the starting job away from Fromm, because this kid's talented.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to ask you is, this isn't going to be a will he take the job from Fromm, because that question is no. But will he be used this season at all? Because the big question is, Fromm's going to be the starter, but they've got a guy on this roster who's a true freshman, Justin Fields. He's a guy that I watched. I remember watching his announcement video.
Oh, okay.
Like his announcement video, and I'm like, oh, he's going to pick he's going to pick LSU or this team. And then he's like, I'm going to go to the Dogs. And my first thought was, you're a quarterback. You do know Jake Fromm's there, right? Like, that was my first thought. You do know you're not starting for at least 2, maybe 3 years. And the thing that it says here, I'll read you what this preview I'm looking at says, where it says, true freshman Justin Fields was a 5-star recruit who enrolled early and gives Georgia a great dual threat option, the kind Smart has hungered for since seeing Clemson's Deshaun Watson carve up his defense at Alabama. Is there a chance, whether the smallest, they give Fields some packages to use his dual threat ability and not necessarily make it a true 2-quarterback situation, but in some situations go, all right, we're going to bring Fromm off, we're going to put Fields in to have a small package for Fields to help this offense to give it a different look at times?
I think so. I think that he can definitely get some cuts in. I think he's going to be a guy that definitely is used in packages, because, again, if you have a guy that's this talented, you're going to need to use him in different ways. And it's not going to be something where he's going to be used for a whole quarter. He's not going to be used for a whole half.
But you don't want it to be like every time he's in, oh, it's going to be a run. It's going to be a run, guys. Load the box.
I think it's something where you could use him in goal line situations. I mean, we saw that back in Texas where they had the 18-wheeler, whole deal. Obviously, a different player.
Yeah.
But I think that he's definitely going to be used, especially hey, if the running game's not getting going, let's throw them in there. Let's see if we can get some read options, try to bust a big play. If they're backed up in their own zone, maybe they, be like, hey, let's bring in the freshman and just have a guy, let's make him think we're going to run, have him run a fly route on the outside and try to beat the defense. Like, I think he's going to be used in different packages. I don't think he's going to be used that much. I think Fromm's clearly going to be the starter and probably take 80%, maybe 85% of the snaps this year. But I think Fields is going to get some work.
And I was going to ask you about the defense, because I'm looking at the defense. But the thing that kind of maddens me about the defense is, you can say their biggest question is their secondary. But I kind of hated, I'm thinking in my mind, man, it kind of stinks for a preview that we're sitting here going, they lost all these players. They'll be fine. And then not mention anything. Do you have not necessarily a worry, but could this defense take a minor step back this year because they lost so much? They lost 8 guys who started on this defense, and all 4 of them, at the linebacker position. Yeah, they've got guys to fill up, but will they same thing with Fromm? Better, same, worse than last year for the defense?
Oh, for the defense, worse. I mean, that's just because they lost massive playmakers. I mean, you lose Roquan Smith. You lose, who's the other guy the edge rusher?
Lorenzo Carter.
Yeah, you lose Lorenzo Carter. You lose good old Roquan Smith. You're not going to have that leader that you did in Roquan Smith. Do I think they're going to be much worse? No, I think they're still going to be a top defense in the NCAA. But I think they're going to be worse just because you're losing the guy in the middle. You're losing Roquan Smith. He is, I know there's 11 guys in the field, but he was the guy in the defense that you looked at consistently. He was a guy consistently making plays, running back and forth around it. And this is why he was a top 10 pick, because of his abilities on the field, but also because he was a good leader. I think not having that player is going to at least damper this Georgia defense. I still think they're going to be a damn good football team and win some games.
Well, and that's going to be, to me, the only hiccup that this team has, and what will be the ultimate answer for how well they do this year. Because let's be honest, they're, like me and you have said in this podcast, I think already, they're the favorites to win the East. They might even be unless it's Alabama, they could be in some minds the favorite to win the SEC again. That might be more of a toss-up because, yet again, Auburn and Alabama are no joke, and those are who we're assuming or favoriting to win the west side of the ball. But I feel like if this defense stumbles out of the gate and a team like South Carolina gets them and pops them in the mouth and wins a game, that could be a game, that could be a thing that we look back and it's like, man, this Georgia team, man, they finished the year good. Yeah, they did. Oh, man, they're like, man, that Auburn game was good. Too bad they lost it again. Oh, man, could you imagine what happened if they didn't lose that South Carolina game? Man, probably would have been a playoff team. Like, the defense to me is the biggest question, and that needs to, it's only of a how fast do they get on page to where they were last year or to where a team like South Carolina doesn't shock them week 2 of the year.
Well, I think South Carolina is a good enough football team to give them some hell. I think Georgia's going to be favored.
But if South Carolina won that game, it would send shockwaves throughout college football.
For sure. But, I mean, that's with any upset.
Yeah.
So,
especially with a team that's the runner-up and so dominant.
I think Georgia is going to be a team that, again, like I said earlier, should be favored in every single game they play by 10, and even in that Auburn game, should be favored probably by 7. And that South Carolina game, maybe even by like 9, or maybe even 10.
Do you think when we get because I've got to look into it, when we get our first preseason rankings, do you think Alabama and Georgia are 1-2?
I don't see any other team really jumping Georgia for that 2 spot.
Maybe a Clemson if the voters like them more.
Clemson or Ohio State maybe, but Georgia, I see Georgia being a top 3 team. Alabama 1, maybe Clemson, but again, Georgia still has Kirby Smart. They still have Jake Fromm. They still have a pretty damn good defense, even though they lost 8 of their starters. So I think they give the respect to Georgia. I think Georgia ends up at 2.
I'm going to say my top 5, because we're done with the SEC. My top 5, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and either Oklahoma or Auburn. One will be 5, one will be 6.
I'll say mine's the same thing, but put Oklahoma at 5.
Okay. Let us know what you guys think down below about Georgia. What are they going to do this year? How fast is that defense going to load? Are they going to go back to the college football playoff? Could they be a national championship game participant yet again this year? Want to thank you guys for checking out the podcast. Go ahead.
I want to give you an update because this means nothing to college football, but it means something to college basketball. Final in the in the FIBA U18 Americans game. U.S. men's team wins 118-26 over Panama.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I told you, I think his first name is Ayo, one of the big guys on that team, hoping, knocking on wood, that he does some great things for my Illini this year. But a little housekeeping here at the end of the podcast for you guys. Number 1, if you want to be like Matt, which thanks to Matt, again, it was a long time ago, but he was on this podcast at the beginning. If you want to be like Matt and join us for a podcast, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast, where you can help support MVP each and every month. Also, make sure to check out our store either in the link in the description or check out mostvaluablepodcast.com where you can catch it. Make sure to get yourself an MVP t-shirt. Also, mostvaluablepodcast.com is where you can catch MVP each and every day. And last but not least, if you're on Apple Podcasts, you have iTunes, have either or, make sure to go give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating, then type a little something about why other people should check out the podcast and why you like it so much. It would really mean the world to us. Want to thank you guys for listening to the podcast, whether it's on YouTube watching it or listening on podcast services around the world. We will be back next week where we will be doing the Big 12 in football, just shrugging through our college previews. But as always, have a good day, everybody.